Welcome to a little tutorial on how to paint a California poppy. If you are here because you joined my 31-day flower challenge for March 2022, welcome. I'm so glad you're here painting with me. And if you just found my tutorial randomly on YouTube, that's totally cool too. Either way, we're gonna paint a poppy, a California poppy. So a couple of things you'll need. I like to use 2 water cups, one for cool tones and one for warm tones. And you're gonna need a pencil. The reason I have my paper tape down is because I'm not working on a watercolor block. If you are working on a watercolor block, you do not need to tape your paper down. But if you are working just on a sheet of paper by itself, you need to tape your paper down so it doesn't buckle. I have a couple different size brushes here. Really, you could use any one you want, but it's gonna work best if you have a couple variations in size. I have a size 6, a size 4, and a size 1. And then we're gonna be using some orange, yellow tones, and some green tones. Now, if you've never watercolor painted before and you want a little beginner's guide, I do have a course available now on Skillshare. I will link it in the little notes in this YouTube tutorial. Otherwise, we're just gonna get started and I'm gonna bring you through everything, so don't feel like if you've never painted before, you can still do this as long as you have the correct supplies. The first thing we're gonna do is just sketch out the California poppy. In California poppies, you can pull up a photo on your phone if you'd like. I actually took this photo this morning because mine are finally blooming, which is amazing. They're so pretty, but they only have 4 little petals. I mean, they're kind of big petals, but there's only 4. So we're gonna keep that in mind when we sketch. And I'm gonna do a little side view. So I'm almost making a cup. I'm gonna draw darker because I want you guys to be able to see it, but when you draw on watercolor paper, you wanna make it as light as possible. So just do kind of an elongated C. This is gonna be the little cup, and then kind of a jagged edge for the petal. And then we're going to do a petal coming out here, here, and here. So a straight line, and then a little jagged edge, and bring it down. Little jagged edge, bring it down. And then this one, which is gonna extend just a little further. And I'm gonna do 2 of them. And then I'm also gonna do a little, like the flower that hasn't quite bloomed yet. So that one, I'm gonna make a line, double line for the stem. Then it almost has this little disc underneath it. And then just almost like a triangle, but curves to the side a little bit. And then I'm gonna make this stem here and have it come down. And then I'm gonna do another one that looks like this, but facing the other way. So that cup shape. And feel free to just paint one if that's all you wanna do. You don't have to do all of this. I don't have an eraser nearby, so I'm just gonna go over it like this. Okay, and then make the stem come down. And poppies have these unique leaves where it comes out, but there's a lot of little leaves on top of it. I don't really know how to explain this. It's almost like a rake or something. Look up a photo if you've never seen one before, but their leaves are really different. So we want to make sure to showcase that. And we're not going to get too detailed on our painting today. For time-wise, I want this to be simple for you guys and not overwhelming. But typically what I like to do is I like to work in a lot of layers, but today we're only going to do a couple. So here's our basic drawing. And again, I drew really dark so you guys would be able to see it, but you should be drawing lighter than this just so the pencil marks don't come through in your painting. I'm gonna pick up some orange paint. And poppies are like extremely bright and you can make them as bright as you want, but for this first layer, I'm going to mix a little bit of yellow in it, just so it's a little variation. Every year around spring, the poppies in California are so amazing. I love them. Okay, you have your brush full of paint. Now this is not super saturated. There's a good amount of water in here because we're almost just putting a wash over this. So I have a good amount of water, and I'm just coming in here and painting that bottom layer. We need a little more water. And my pencil lines are so dark, they're gonna shine right through, but that's okay. For the purposes of this, it's okay. And you can add in a little, so now this is all wet. I'm gonna grab a little bit of just that bright orange and just poke it in here. And once it dries, it's gonna look really cool because it's just gonna bleed in. Just spots where there would be a little shadow. So there would be a shadow under here because this petal is higher than these are. And I could even add maybe just a touch of pink to make it just that much darker. And I'm just poking it in with the tip of my brush. And I don't want it to actually be bleeding in here. So what I'm gonna do is rinse off my brush. I'm gonna dry it off on the paper towel. And I'm coming back with a partially dry, so there's no water dripping off of this brush, and it doesn't have any paint on it. And I just press down my brush, and it's going to pull up that pigment. Pretty cool. So that it's not getting that bleeded look. And I am going to add a little bit, just poke in that darkness down here, because technically there would be a shadow at the bottom. Okay, now we're going to do the same thing. We're gonna put a wash on this one. And I didn't have any eraser, so that's gonna show through, but that's okay. Hopefully you guys had an eraser or you didn't draw through your petal. And once we have this base layer down, we can go in and poke in some extra color if you want to. So I really like how that's looking. So I'm gonna get just a darker orange, just lightly poke it in here. Now the thing with watercolor is if you're working in layers, you have to wait until it dries. So we're going to have to wait until this dries, but we're gonna work on other parts of it while we wait. I have dog hair on my brush, which is a common thing that happens almost every single day. And again, I want to pull up, I don't want this bleeding here, so I'm gonna pull this up. I am going to put just a little bit down here. Okay. And we can also do this little bloom over here. I'm gonna make it a little more yellow. Oops, I went outside the line a little bit. That's okay. Okay, now while we wait for our blooms to dry, I'm going to mix up some green. We're gonna work on those leaves. So I have sap green right here. And I'm going to mix it in with a little yellow. You can use any green you'd like, but poppy leaves are kind of a bluish, almost a sage color. They are green, of course, but they're a sage color instead of a bright green. At least the ones I have at my house are. You can make them bright green if you want, but if you want to do it more true, then definitely mix up a sage looking color. I'm gonna grab my smaller brush for this, my size 4. And we're not gonna get too crazy with layering with the leaves. So I'm literally just drawing along where I drew my leaves with my paintbrush. And I'm using the tip of my paintbrush. Now it's gonna be really boring if all we're doing is just using the same exact color for these. So every now and then, grab maybe a little more yellow and add it to that green. And you can either go back over that same area or just make a new area with just the green. Maybe that's where the new growth was for the leaf. It just makes it more interesting when you're painting to add in different variations and hues. Otherwise, it just looks very flat and one note. I'm gonna bring in that green again. If there are any flowers that you guys would like to learn how to paint, just let me know in the comments. I always read my comments and I try to accommodate any requests that you guys have. That color got a little different than it's supposed to be. A little too green or a little too bright. These leaves, maybe a little yellow. And you could even come in with just water and kind of blot it around so it looks a little like blended. It's all about whatever your style or the look you're going for is. That's what I love about watercolor is there's no hard rules. You just, I mean, there are some rules that you need to follow when you're painting, but there's nothing, you can develop your own style, which is really cool. I'm just painting this stem. I'm just using the tip of my brush because I'm going to be able to get the nicest lines with the tip of my brush. And just keep in mind, if you're going to touch any of these, the paint might bleed because they're still wet. So be mindful of that. If some people like that look, that's kind of the loose watercolor look. For me, it's not the look I'm going for today, so I'd prefer it not to happen. But it seems like this is drying pretty quickly. I'm right by a window, so that probably helps. Then we're going to do these leaves down here. Again, I'm just making little lines with the tip of my brush. Every now and then I'll add a little more yellow. There you go. Okay. Awesome. And I am going to get some water and just kind of tap it in here. Make it bleed a little bit. And I'm going to grab a little darker green because I want to do just a slight shadow here. Because technically there would be a little shadow here. It's little things like this, adding small shadows in places that really enhance your painting. There would be a shadow here. This is not dark enough. Hold on. Okay, there we go. A little shadow there, there, probably here, and then all along the side. I talk about this a lot, but it's important to know where your light source is coming from in your paintings, because if you don't, it's going to be confusing for the viewer. So here, our light source, we're doing a shadow on this side. So that means that our light source must be coming this way. So this is a great example of where we would be putting a shadow for sure, is on this side, since the light's coming from the right side. Really simple. Okay. And it looks like this is not quite dry yet. And I can tell that it's not dry because it's a little shiny. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to put a little more detail in these leaves because they dried really quickly. I'm adding in a little darker tone and just really light. Nothing too nice. It is still wet, so be careful. But just a little bit of detail here. And detail on the side of this guy. This is a little too wet, but we're just going to add in a little shadow here. Just shadow here. I think we're okay. So it is still wet, but I'm able to poke in color and it's not going too many directions, which is good. I'm just adding in a little darker orange. And darker orange here. The key to working with layers is to let it completely dry. But since we're just adding in a color that's very similar, it's okay for this painting. Okay, now we are gonna let this dry, and then when we come back, we can work on a couple more details here. So I'm gonna let it dry naturally and pause the video, but if you guys wanna grab a hair dryer, that will help it dry really quickly. These are mainly dry, so we're going to come in and add a little detail. So the inside of a poppy has this, like, I guess it's the pollen technically, but it's kind of a dark brown color. So grab a darkish brown, and the smallest brush you have, I have a size 1 just so I can get small lines. I'm just making these tiny little lines, almost like little hairs that are just poking through. Hopefully your guys' pencil lines are not sticking out as bad as mine are. So just adding that small detail, and then I'm going to grab an orange with a little tiny bit of blue. So it's just a little bit muddied, but not super, like I don't want blue or like black, just making it like a burnt orange. I'm just making these tiny lines where these would cross the petals. Maybe up here a little bit. And then down here. And if they seem too harsh for you, just grab a little bit of water and blend it in. Just doing this all the way around. And it's a little harsh, so I'm going to blend it in. And make a little one up here. And there we go, our really simple tutorial for the lovely California poppy. I hope you guys enjoyed this.